Hello, hello. Welcome, 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 welcome. I am so excited to be here with you all today. My name is Danielle Irwin. I'm Chief Operations Officer here at A Call to Men. And as always, it is such a pleasure and an honor to welcome you into this space. I don't know about you all, but I feel like one of the good things about us being in this virtual space now due to COVID and the rest of 2020, right, is that it makes it so easy to get from one meeting to the next. But then I do feel like kind of the downside to that is that our calendars seem more full and more packed as usual. So it really, really is an honor for us to be with you for this next hour. We really are so appreciative that you all trust us with your time, and we want to make sure that we are honoring that. We have a very packed call today. We have lots of folks that are with us, and I'm really excited for you to hear from Jordan and Chucho and Josue as we kind of get into the content. So I do want to take a couple minutes just to walk through some quick logistics to help make sure that we are making the most of our hour together. If you haven't been with us before, then you know that these community conversations are not like your typical webinar or your typical Zoom meeting. These truly are conversations, right? We want to make sure that we are hearing from you, and your voice is so vital to our conversation today. So you see there on the screen some options for you to put your voice into the space. There's going to be several times over the next hour where we're going to open it up where you can ask questions or make a comment or just share what's going on in your community and tell us about the work that you're doing. So one way is to use Zoom's raise hand feature. So you see here on the graphic, you click that participant button on the bottom of your Zoom bar, and then you'll have the option to raise your hand, and that just raises you in our queue so that we can easily see you, recognize you, and bring your voice into the space. The second option that you have is to use the chat box, which I already see folks are making use of. So you can put a comment or a question there, and we'll do our very best to bring that in. And also, if you are watching with us on Facebook, also you can use the comment section there. We have some of our staff that's watching, and they'll bring your voices into the space here as well. And then lastly, we do have two interpreters with us today. So you'll see their name if you go on the participant list. Their names are interpreter Kate and interpreter Amy. Keep your eye on the chat as well, because they will let you know when they're going to switch. And there's some tips there on how you can pin their video just to make sure that you're able to see them and utilize that service throughout the next hour. So again, I'm super excited to be here with you all today. And now I'm going to turn things over to Josue, who's going to be our moderator for the next hour. Josue?
Thank you, Danny. Appreciate that. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is that you're joining us from today. Really happy to have you all here in this space. And, you know, it's just as Danny opened up for us and really set the tone and shared the intention of the space. We just want to acknowledge that here at A Call to Men, this is what we do, right? This is how we model accountability by inviting women to speak first and last in our gatherings. And whenever possible, Black women to really be opening and sharing the space and closing us out. So I'm happy to have you all here today. And there's a couple things we're gonna do here on this call, in this conversation, right? So we're gonna do a check-in and really know where you all are sitting with, where you're at specifically in your community, in your life. We really wanna hear from you, right? We wanna do a check-in because we're really living, not even just extremely challenging times, but really trying times, right? So we wanna check in with you all as a community. Secondly, we're having a conversation because our young folks are headed back to school, right? In one way or another. And they're doing this amidst the racial trauma, the pandemic that's happening and a lot of instability and destabilization that has happened to a lot of their homes, their communities, and their environments, right? So it's critical that we really create this space and talk about how we can build a culture to support one another, to build a culture of respect, of equity, and where our young folks are valued, particularly in this time. And so I also have the pleasure of being joined by my brother Chucho Ruiz, who has been working with youth and has been using the Live Respect curriculum of A Call to Men for 5 years. So he'll be sharing some insights with us and dropping some knowledge, right, on how these circles of young people have been going with him and teach and share together and practices. And I'm also joined by Jordan Muhammad, who is a peer leader of YouthAC, which is the youth organizing efforts of A Call to Men, who work in New York City to promote healthy masculinity, healthy relationships, and prevent gender-based violence. And honestly, one of the funnest, most talented people I've had an opportunity to work alongside. So I'm really happy to have her here. So I'll bring them into the conversation in a bit. As I mentioned, we want to do a check-in. So I want to open up and get a few of your voices here into this space today, right? Because I'm currently in California. And so as I'm holding space here, I'm also holding space for the way my family and my friends are impacted right now by the fires, right? And so you add that on top of already the tensions, the stresses, particularly that I'm seeing from my niece and nephews of trying to manage technology for school. So there's a lot happening for us wherever we're at. So we want to really acknowledge that. So use the raise hand feature. Danny, if there's anybody with their hands in the space, I really invite you all to just, keep your comments brief, but like I'm asking you to share of yourself and do a check-in. So do we have any hands raised right now, Danny?
So let's see. I'm not seeing any hands raised yet, but you all know how we do here at A Call to Men. We're never shy to volunteer some folks. So I'm going to go to our friend Will from New Jersey, and he's looking at me as if he knew I was going to call on him too.
I knew it. I had a sneaky suspicion. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here on the call, to be in the space with all of you. I'm excited to be here today. It's been a long couple of days, but I'm very, very happy to be here today. Thankful for a lot of things. There's so many opportunities to be negative in this world right now, especially with the state of our nation. But I choose to be positive. I choose to see the opportunities, and I'm thankful that I've had those opportunities over the past couple of weeks to really engage with men in my community, to really build a space for them to bring their fears, their hurts, their pains, their frustrations, their desires, their ambitions, to bring that to a place where they can speak freely and comfortably. So that's what I've been doing. That's what I've been choosing to do. Instead of harping on the negative, I'm going to find the positive and build on it. So I'm very thankful to be in this space today.
Thank you. Well, appreciate that. Always a pleasure to see you, and always here to support, and vice versa. So thank you for sharing that. Let's go. I see Latoya Donaldson's hand up. Yep. Latoya, let's go to you. Check in with us.
Okay, let's try. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I had to take my headphones out. I'm at work. This is my first time getting on. I am new to the Fort Walton Beach, Florida area. I am working with Shelter House. We help stop domestic violence and sexual assault. My personal self, I am a survivor of domestic violence and sexual assault, and using my healing process to give back and try to get some things changed. I'm originally from Charlotte, North Carolina. I am literally on a spiritual journey here, and it led me here for right now. Like I say, I'm trying to do some good in the community, and my main purpose for jumping on today is my position is domestic violence prevention educator. And so I am trying to reach out to other organizations to not only help prevent domestic violence and sexual assault, but I want to work with the root cause. And I am trying to partner with people who can help me reach out to the people who are being abused. Because most of you know, hurt people actually hurt people. So if we can get in touch with those hurt people and find out why they're hurt and try to get them some help, then we can actually start moving towards the road of prevention. So that's why I'm here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here, Latoya. Appreciate all the incredible work that you are doing for your community right there. And Charlotte, North Carolina has a special heart for us here at A Call to Men. So appreciate you having here. I see Billy Edwards' hand up. Let's go to you, Billy. Check in with us.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. I'm out here in California, so good morning, good morning. Again, thank you guys for hosting this and allowing this space to exist. I really appreciate it. I know I was with you guys like a month or so ago, kind of lost touch a little bit, but it's good to be back. You know, same thing, Will, I'm going to go off a lot what you said. You know, we're really trying to find these positives. And I know with some of our individuals in our agency, we work for a prevention agency as well. School, for one, has just been tough, both for parents and for kids. You know, we have a lot of kids that are looking at their teachers and they're saying they understand everything. And then, you know, 3 or 4 hours later, they go to their parents and they're saying, what? You know, so it's a lot of confusion. But I know one thing that we got to do is we were lucky enough to get into a foster youth program and go through some of our teen dating violence prevention. And, you know, one positive I was really able to take away from that, kind of like what we were mentioning earlier, how we're able to just jump into these different meetings. And these kids are just so ready to learn, and they're so ready to have this space made for them so that they can talk and they can express what it is that they're going through. Because when I only had the 1 hour with them, we just talked about so much, and there's so many things that you can tell they were just looking for that they were able to get within a single hour. So even with everything that's going on, the second we can make that space for our kids, especially within the schools, it makes a world of difference.
Appreciate that, Billy. Thank you so much. And it's very key what you're highlighting, right? The the expectation that they should know everything and learn it right away, right? As an adult, being taken away from my friends and launched into this virtual space, I don't feel equipped to fully comprehend that, cope with that. So I can only imagine for the little ones in our lives right now, the severity of that. So thank you for that, Billy. Okay, I see Charles Austin here. Let's go to you, Charles.
Hello, everyone. My name is Charles Austin. I'm from Greenville, South Carolina. I'm CEO of Men Facing Masculinity. I'm here today because I have two granddaughters to be, a 14 and a 17-year-old that have a lot of anxiety about this racism thing, going back to school in the midst of this pandemic, during these unprecedented times, during these perilous times. And I just need to know how to have conversations with them. I deal mostly with young boys, but having my granddaughters come to me in with this anxiety level, I just need to know how to talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you, Charles. We appreciate you for bringing that into this space. And, you know, this is the intention of the conversation, right? That we're not siloed, that we're really moving from the self-care, which is important, but really starting to frame our conversations around communal care, right? Because we do need ourselves as a community to really be uplifting and supporting each other during these challenging times. And so this space that we're going to be co-creating over the next half hour is really to, you know, for you all to connect and share and learn ways in we can do that amidst the racial trauma, right? And amidst like mental health increasing for our young people in our lives. So let's get into the conversation. You know, we're here today. Tazo Kamati Chucho for being here. And Chucho is actually with the Naviolin Wellness Program. He's a coordinator for Chicanos for La Causa. And he's been working with young people and using our Live Respect curriculum around healthy manhood for the last 5 years. And so I really appreciate you being here in this space today to share with us, Chucho. And, I want to start by, as we're getting into, this back into kind of routine per se, right, of starting the school year. And young people are coming back together, whether on campus or in online settings. For you and the young people that you work with, how are you addressing racism and anti-Blackness in the spaces that you all share together?
Sorry about that. I was just slow on the unmuting. No, I appreciate you, Josue. Thank you. Good morning to everyone. For us, it's an ongoing thing that we keep relevant in our discussions with our youth. That's what our program is all about. Just trying to keep them engaged on like what's going on in the world, right? And unfortunately, we get reminders all the time, right? Like they're plugged into media at all times. So for us, it was important to stick with them throughout the summer. We took to social media and we connected with them that way. And we started doing virtual hangouts with them. And so we're really intentional about talking about, our program is rooted in ancestral knowledge because of the area and the region that we're at of indigenous peoples. So we talk about settler colonialism and tie that into racism and the other systems of oppression. But we're very intentional about talking about also anti-Blackness in the sense of bringing up Black history, Black culture, Black identity, and get the youth to start speaking about that. And so at some of the schools, we've created different bulletin boards. We've created different discussions. A lot of our virtual hangouts were about that because that's what the youth wanted to talk about. They were, they needed somewhere to talk about it. And we were fortunate enough that we had that space, that virtual space, to be able to share in that.
Appreciate that, Chucho. Thank you. And far too often, I think we overlook, right, the actual thirst that our young people have for these spaces to have these conversations, right? And I'm glad that you are following leadership in creating that for what they're asking for, right? Specifically what they need. Can you share, just because I know our Live Respect curriculum, right, is different lesson plans on, anything from consent to healthy manhood to gender norms. How are you all using that curriculum with your program?
Well, we've used it different capacities. We've been fortunate, through our organization, we do operate 2 charter schools. So we have them at our charter schools, and we have a lot of flexibility to be able to do it during instruction time throughout the day, or doing it as an after-school program. So we've done both, and we've also worked with the youth that are athletes and the athletics programs. We've made it a requirement to be part of the sports. And then more recently, we spread out to the bigger school districts, and we've been working with the sports programs there. But one of the thing, again, and this goes back to youth feedback and their thirst for wanting to get more engaged, is so we're providing it ongoing in the classroom, but then connecting it to things that are happening in the community. So we take them on field trips, do community-based education, and getting involved around, events like Take Back the Night, our local Take Back the Night, or Denim Day, just try to expose them in that sense, so they're seeing it in the community in real time, and not just in the classroom, so they're able to make those connections. And we see a shift at the schools, definitely, like a culture shift. A lot of we're so fortunate. A lot of the young men are willing to be very vulnerable in those spaces. And then there is the pushback also of around that notion of safety, right? How could we learn about this idea of masculinity and still be safe, right? But so we've been fortunate enough to do it, and we're currently like at 6 different high schools and 1 middle school right now with the Live Respect. And during pandemic, we started the Chantlaca OG virtual sessions, which is more directed towards youth of color. We're very intentional about the language that we use. Chantlaca is a native word that means homies, and OG is an acronym for original gente, right? And that was a name that like they came up with. So we're loving it, you know. So it speaks to, again, like things that they're interested in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That reclaiming, right, of one's culture, to
Mhm.
see our young folks leading that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I'm just I'm really grateful for all that you're providing there in your community, in your space. And you know, as we moved into like the online learning environment settings for young people, um, they're coming across, right, they're going to be coming across a lot of teachers, mentors, coaches that, you know, may not be fully equipped, and may not be even acknowledging the times that we're living in, right? And those traumas that are impacting them outside of the school environment. So in your experience, do you have any wisdom that you would share as far as like some recommended practices for those mentors and coaches as they're having these conversations with the young people?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of it has been shared already by some of the folks that were like checking in. Like one of it is like trying to be positive, right? Like trying to approach things from a positive perspective, asset perspective, and getting involved like in other ways as well. And you know, not just the time that you have them in front of you, but like being able to actively be involved in their life in other ways. But I would say the biggest thing is listening, like active listening, and like believing them is super important. And because I'm thinking like one of the main things that has came up for us with the youth, a sense of what they're needing right now is validation, right? So not being quick to like assume things, but just being able to like listen and believe them and validate them, right? So I think those are some of the things that have been like helpful for us, and for us even learning as well from them.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chicho. I appreciate that insight. And you know, we'll have a little bit more space in the Q&A for folks that have specific questions for you and the incredible work that you're doing, right? But as we're talking about listening to young people, I want to take the opportunity to now introduce Jordan Muhammad, who again is our peer leader at Youth Act, right? And has been in this work over the last year of promoting healthy masculinity, of addressing anti-Blackness, white supremacy in different spaces that young people navigate. So Jordan, welcome. And I wanted to ask you, you know, to start off this conversation, the importance for you, right? The importance of why we directly need to be addressing race and anti-Blackness in this current moment.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be sharing this space with all of you, and it's so exciting or empowering to know that so many people are interested in this topic. To address your question, it's really essential that we address current events, especially those being that of racism and anti-Blackness in this current moment in school, because for too long, so much of our classrooms or parents in general and in our society has taken the idea that like, if we ignore it, then we'll just have not racist children. But rather, society will fill that space. Movies and TV shows and stereotypes will create a racism. So we actually have to be actively anti-racist if we don't want to raise racist and biased children, just like with sexual health education. And you really have that power as a teacher. And also part of the idea comes in with creating communication and the fact that these things relate to what you're learning about. So when we learn about history, teaching them in the lens of the current present, and teaching them in the lens of these systems of oppression that have existed in them. And as we learn about math, as we learn about any other subjects, like knowing that representation is an essential thing to think about. And so always seeing how you can connect to the present, especially in terms of this current discussion on anti-Blackness. It's really powerful, and it's necessary.
Thank you, Jordan, for sharing that. Appreciate that. You know, and you've been in this in part of Youth Act for over a year now, and actively committing, right, to promote healthy masculinity and really engage our young folks. So for those of us that are the more seasoned folks in this conversation, what should we be considering in engaging and supporting other young people in their activism?
Yeah, something that I hear a lot is the idea that, and this is all good-hearted and it's not a judgment, but that youth, like you guys, wanting to be allies, and so the youth are going to lead us forward. Like, we've already made a mistake. Like, you guys got this, but like, it shouldn't be just on the youth to make change. And so, like, yes, give us a voice, but instead of being an ally, like, here's how I can help you, like, be a co-conspirator and figure out how you can join in the effort. Because what we've been seeing through this movement is that we are strongest when we are united. And we're not always going to agree on things. Like, that's part of what being a youth is, bringing in new perspectives. But we get the best results when we synthesize our thinking and work together. So really try to be that co-conspirator in this work, and uplift voices as well.
Absolutely. And, you know, there's something to be said about these spaces and the impact that they have on our young people, right? When we're supporting and help and supporting and creating these opportunities, these spaces, these conversations for our young leaders. And so in your personal experience, how has your involvement and your continued practice with Youth Act, how has that helped you as a community organizer, as a youth activist, as a human being? How has that helped you?
Yeah, Youth Act, just as any leadership experience, the idea of gaining some more responsibility. I was commuting back when that happened from New Jersey, and so time management and the basic benefits of being given a responsibility. But some of the very specific things that Youth Act has given me, especially in terms of the workshop that you guys put on, that we were given the ability to participate in. That was amazing for me. The resource you gave us on characteristics of white supremacy, I've been using that in my circles and doing learning sessions around that, because that really opened my world to some things I hadn't learned about. Also, just discussions of trauma and generational trauma and the intersections of trauma. Just the information that A Call to Men as an organization has given us, Youth Act, to inform our work, has really just opened my perspective around the world and in all ranges of my activism. And so I'm really thankful for that.
Thank you, Jordan. And we're extremely thankful and grateful to have you be one of those young leaders, right? That is really helping us shift the culture, shift the narrative towards a more equitable and environment where everybody feels valued and safe. And, you know, speaking of environments, we have this whole online class environment, right? And I specifically am witnessing it, right? With my nephew who started second grade and was expected to, like, within the first 2 days, navigate Google Docs and Gmail and like how to open slides. All this stuff is overwhelming, right? And add on top of that, the racial trauma, the pandemic that they're living through. And we really need to be lifting up the mental health impact on our young folks, right? On the little ones. And so is there anything that you want to share with us about supporting young people's mental health and well-being through this environment that we're all learning, right? one day at a time. Anything specifically around mental health that we should be really listening to?
Yeah, I would definitely say one being what I had previously talked about in terms of just talking, not ignoring what is currently happening, because this is a really, really large and important teaching moment. And just bringing that conversation to the classroom, like I've seen so many scenarios where students, after a teacher brought this into the room, they expressed how they had not been able to talk about this anywhere else. And so giving that space that someone might not have at home, might not have that support system to talk to, I think that's essential. I also think what Anna has graciously shared in the chat, something that my mom had showed me, 12 things equity-focused teachers should say to students as they return to school. It's also kind of a what not to say list, and that this is a very exposing time, in that exposing the inequities that is the reality of our society. And for us to be effective educators, we have to acknowledge those. And so a problem that I ran into during quarantine and schooling was like, an assignment that would normally take me 30 minutes, I would then spend 3 hours on it. Because one, I mean, I liked doing it and I kept wanting to learn more, but then I would spend 3 hours doing that and I hadn't done any of my other work, and time management was stressful and lack of structure. And the situation is going to be different for so many people. And I was lucky enough to have really accommodating teachers. And when I had a loss in the family, my teachers were really understanding that I was maybe not going to be able to be as productive in my work, and they accepted late work. But I also know a friend who that was not at all the situation. The teacher was very unfriendly and unadjustable, and it really hurt her mental health, it hurt her grades, and it hurt her trust for the teachers who are supposed to care about her. And so I think it's really essential for us to be understanding and empathetic and all these things that we're learning about. And then I do really recommend that resource, because we can have the best intentions, but there are always going to be unintended consequences and things that we don't know. So not only trying to do your best, but be willing to be wrong, be willing to learn, and then acknowledge that and try to be better. Yeah.
Thank you for lifting that last piece up, right? Like, we have to really sit with what we're living, right? Which is a lot of traumas on traumas on traumas, right? And so this whole notion of like, oh, I can still operate at 100% is not working. It's not something that's sustainable. It's not something that's gonna be good for the well-being of our mental, emotional, spiritual health in all forms, right? So we really need to be looking at at mental health, but also the coping that goes along with it, right? And again, I'm coming back to communal care, right? The communal care is going to be essential and key for us. And so thank you, Chucho, Jordan, for sharing of yourselves and really bringing to light some really critical issues and points. And so I want to take this time to now open it up to the community we have here. And, you know, as I say community, you know, if you're joining us by phone, I encourage you to, you know, turn your video on. You know, I'm not alone, but I do feel lonely. And I know I'm not alone in that feeling. So this is their space to really build that community. And I do want to open it up for Q&A. And I do want to go back to a question from Samson, I believe. And I'm just scrolling up here. Which is, I think, is a really good question, right? For Chucho Jordan. So Samson says, I'm trying to rewrite our sexual violence prevention curriculum to include systems of oppression and how that creates bias and perpetuates violence. Do you have any advice on how to speak to mostly white rooms about this without them feeling attacked? I'm coming from Southern Maine. Our catchment area is rural and urban. So do you have any advice on how to speak to mostly white rooms about this without them feeling attacked? Chucho or Jordan, care to respond to Samson's question here?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to, unless Jordan had something. Sorry, I know it's sometimes it's hard on the with the virtual. We don't know if somebody's going to speak or not. I'm sorry, Jordan.
I can jump in.
Okay.
Yeah, we did my group did some facilitator training the other day, and that was actually really helpful in thinking of some things. So in terms of, I mean, I guess my first thought is like we should be, I guess, not attacked, but willing to be uncomfortable. And I definitely think that that's something I've learned in this space, and that being uncomfortable is necessary, because there are some people who just live with that, and that is your privilege. And so being willing to break that down and knowing that we have to have uncomfortable conversations to move forward. Then I do, to move forward from there, there is a difference between creating, bringing up uncomfortable things and then attacking. And I think that's where, whenever you're in any discussion, going through community guidelines is essential. So like, what are the ground lines for this conversation? And one of them being, speak for your own experience. So we don't expose others, we don't tell other stories, because you can't back them up, and you can't, you can only speak for yourself, and really instilling that. Coming to a space open-minded and respectful, and then also knowing that, just assuming people have good intentions by being in a space. So once people come into a space and are wanting to learn, assume that they're there for that. And if you're unsure of someone's intentions, questions are everyone's best friend. And then I would also say, I think one of the most important things is like willing to make space uncomfortable and call things out. And a speaker at an event that we went to, she was white, and she's the leader of a social justice organization in our community. And she talked about how you need to go, as a white person, you need to go in spaces and be willing to say, this space is too white. This space is not diverse, and we need to do something to change that. And so being willing to voice the uncomfortable things. As a woke person, I'll say, just be willing to voice the uncomfortable.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jordan. You know, what you're sharing reminds me, for us at A Call to Men, right, really our approach, similar when we go have these conversations with men, right, when we're having these conversations with white people, it's really about the invitation and not an indictment, right? That we're really there to co-create that space and invite folks to the table, right? And these are critical conversations that need to be had. And we really need white folks to stay at the table through all that discomfort that you're describing, right? Because that discomfort, our hope is that would create change, right? From when they leave that table, that the discomfort is something that is carried, right? Similar to when we had the conversations with men, and that will create the change we need. Chucho, anything you wanted to add here?
No, I think Jordan is on point. Yeah. I just want to echo that, like the importance, the importance of that discomfort, and what you're saying also right now in terms of, I think also speaking, some of the things that I've had to do is just speak to like my own privilege, right, and the ways that they intersect as in male supremacy, how that comes up, and the discomfort that I felt. So just being vulnerable and sharing of like those experiences where I've been able to grow in that discomfort, I think is important. So I appreciate that. I would agree with that definitely. Yeah, and it goes back to like like what Jordan said earlier, like we all need to be doing this together, right? So they play a role in our liberation as well. So
absolutely. Thank you. So I'm seeing the chat like on fire right now. So I just want to turn, Danny, any other questions that I might have missed, or any question that's been brought into the space?
So no other hands are raised, and I'm not seeing any other questions here in the chat, but I do see a lot of folks that have attended the virtual training institutes that are leaning into what Jordan talked about earlier, the pieces around gender and trauma and white supremacy. So I know Jordan has participated in the institutes as well as Chucho, and you as well, Josue. So I don't know if there's anything there that you all wanted to bring into this space here as well.
Thank you, Danny. Appreciate it. Yes. So in the institute we do cover the impact of the isms, but also moving towards collective action, right? And so I know there's a lot of folks in this conversation right now. So if you don't have questions, I think it's also important to see maybe some practices around, the conversation we're having around mental health, addressing this, recognizing, right, giving validity to that's the experience of a lot of our young folks. I would want to invite somebody in this space, maybe to share where you're at, if you've been doing something already, right? How are you addressing this in your community, in the learning environment, if you're an educator, a coach, because I think this really is a space to really share with each other and learn what's already being done and what can be enhanced. And so now I see some hands up. Samson's hand up. So actually, let's go to you, Samson.
Okay, hi, sorry. I also had a question again.
Perfect.
But to answer your question about like what our organization is doing right now, we are looking at our values because we don't really have a great set of value statements. We're in Southern Maine. We're an organization that does response services for survivors of sexual assault, but also I work in prevention education. So we're moving towards hiring more people of color on our staff. Maine is like, I think, the whitest state in the country. So, but that doesn't mean that there's no people of color or Black or Indigenous people in Maine. We know that's not true. So rewriting our values so that they reflect what we actually want to do with the community, the reality of our community being mostly white, but also not ignoring the people of color that are in the community, and then trying to hire more people that reflect the community as well. But I had a question to that point of hiring people. Like, we can hire people, but we don't necessarily want to tokenize those people. And we definitely want it to be a space that feels safe for those people who are not white coming into a mostly white space. So do you have any, I don't want to say advice, but like advice on how to like make a safe space for people of color that are coming into this, where historically we have been a majority white organization?
Yeah, and Jordan, Chucho, if you want to chime in here, I will just say, the approach for a call to men really is not even talking about safe space, right? Because that's not something we can ever guarantee. But we do create brave space, right? And that asks of folks to share themselves, to risk themselves and be vulnerable. So I just want to highlight that brave space piece for us. And Chucho, any insight here you want to offer?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, because I think that's something, that comes up a lot, right? It's like, if we're hiring, if organizations are hiring folks of color, is like, are they doing it? And I think that's something where the organization needs to start, is like asking themselves why they're doing it, right? Is it just is it just tokenism? Is it just representation? Or how is it that, what is the role of these individuals that you're bringing on board, and how is it that that they're able to have agency within in that organization, to have a sense of palabra, of word, and like leadership in that agency, within that organization, right? So I think the question is like, why is it that you're doing it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Chucho. I know I have a couple more hands here raised. I see Marcus Banks. Do you want to share a question with us?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I had less of a question. It was more respect to a comment, if that was centered around mental health, which you had posed, Josue, and it really dealt with reframing thought and how to engage our young men, our youth, our teens. I'm a DV outreach and counseling manager at Building Futures, and we have a group for survivors, for men, and the outreach process and not in particularly convincing men, but helping them understand their relationship to being a victim or being a survivor sometimes is difficult, and what having been abused may have looked like. I come from a career Army background. I'm a retired captain and chaplain, and having these conversations of masculinity, the stigmas around mental health, and how you're going to be labeled, and being able to move forward in this position of strength and leadership and capability sometimes is very difficult. And so this whole restructuring of thought and of weakness and how you might even perceive yourself or perceive others is something that continues to be a barrier for men, for youth, for teens, for boys even. I just wanted to present that as a conversational piece and barrier with respect to what you mentioned around mental health.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that, Marcus. The mental health piece again is very critical that we be addressing it, right? And how we're describing it. And Jordan was lifting up some very key pieces earlier, right, around the mental health impact for young people, what that looks like, and ways in which us, right, that have maybe more access to some resources, whatever form that is, to really be showing up, right? We really need to be showing up, stepping up right now for young people in these times. And Jordan, something that you taught me the other day was just this narrative, right, in the online setting of like, oh, young people are at home now, they have all this free time, right? Which that in itself is damaging. Can you share a little bit more about that and its impact?
Yeah, just kind of building what I was talking on before, there are just a plethora of different experiences going on. And this has been a time of loss for many, familial loss. We are in a pandemic, lives are being lost, and that is very much a reality for some students and something to cope with. I also know this is a really tough time mental health wise, especially for young people. Isolation is not a natural thing for humans. But at this time, it is something that is important for us to keep each other healthy and safe. But it can be very damaging and hard to deal with. And I guess something that I actually hadn't mentioned before, but something that I definitely think that the teachers can help with that is the idea of like making school not just a learning space, because it's never just been a learning space, but providing that social space for students if you can. So like encouraging students to come earlier so you can spend 5 minutes chatting like you would be able to do in a classroom setting, or leaving that time after and actually being able to facilitate some kind of conversation, and or allowing people to use the chat at certain times when it's appropriate and you're not taking away from the lesson. But really applying that that space for people to be able to socialize, something that a lot of people aren't getting if they're trying to keep each other safe. And I've gotten this private message twice, and I'm wondering if I can just lift up a question. Someone has asked me, what is anti-Blackness? And yes, I can give a quick answer. It's really the larger definition or encompassing definition of white privilege and racism, because, and this is something that exists worldwide, the idea of that colonialism and our collective socialization, the hierarchies we've created, have made it so being Black is bad and being white is good. And that's not because of anything scientific. It's because for so much of our society, being white meant you got special treatment. You got paid more, you got jobs, you got treated like a human being. And we have associated white to being good, and that is perpetuated by commercials and lack of representation and skin whitening creams in many countries that show that being Black is bad. And so that's the anti-Blackness that exists institutionally and exists within all of us. And it's our job to combat actively these biases that we have and that we see around us.
Thank you, Jordan, for dropping that knowledge with us. I appreciate it. You know, and it's all our job, right, to further continue educating not only ourselves, but the people around us in our community. So I really, you know, these conversations, there's never enough time to have them. So I really want to appreciate Jordan, Chucho, for everything that you've shared. I appreciate you both so much. And to a lot of the great points and resources that were shared in the chat, right? And this is just a continuation, right, of these conversations. We have a lot that we need to work on together, and we have to be committed to being in these spaces together. So I just want to give some time to also share a couple things that A Call to Men has coming up. So Anna Marie, will you share that with the folks in this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Josue, and thank you, Chucho and Jordan, for all of your wisdom that you shared with us today. We really appreciate you all. So folks, the next call is October 7th at 1 Eastern. We will be talking about how philanthropy can create a more just world post-pandemic. And we will have friends from the New York Women's Foundation and Michael Stars with us for those calls. Additional calls are November 11th and December 16th. All of them are at 1 Eastern, and you can sign up for all of them at acalltomen.org. We are super grateful to Harry's because they make these calls free for all of our community members. So we just want to lift them up in the process. We're going to continue this conversation in our Facebook group. So if you haven't already joined the Facebook group, I encourage you to click on the link in the chat and join the conversation there. You can always find us on our social channels at A Call to Men on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. You can find our CEO, Tony Porter, on Twitter at Tony Porter ACTM, and Ted Bunch on Instagram at ted.bunch. We know that a lot of you are looking for additional training opportunities. It's come up multiple times today. We hold training institutes. They are in-depth anti-sexism, anti-racism trainings. We hold them monthly. They're open to the public. So you can sign up for those at acalltomen.org. We are also going to be announcing our first virtual training institute, same training, but for youth. It will be in October. We're going to send out more details on that in the next 10 days or so. So please look for information on our first youth training institute in the next 10 days. And for any of our partners out there who need to bring training into their organizations, we are here to help with that. You can reach out to anyone on our team. You can email us at info@acalltomen.org if you don't have somebody that you're connected to, and we can brainstorm with you on how to make that happen. there's no more important time than now to do these things and to have these conversations. So we are sincerely grateful for you showing up today and for doing the work in your own communities. And we hope that you will join us in some of the spaces that I've mentioned. Josue?
Thank you, Anna Marie. So as we wrap up here, when I was mentioning earlier about we need to show up for our young folks, right, for the young people in our lives, and what really that is asking is like, what can you do with intention around this conversation, right? Around these issues of racial trauma. How can you inspire action and change in the platforms and the influence that you have? So we're going to continue this conversation in this particular question in our Facebook group. So I encourage you all to join us there. And again, Jordan, Chucho, extremely grateful for both of you for sharing this space with us today. And as I noted earlier, right, the modeling of we have women's voices open and close the space. And so with that, I'm turning it over to Danny for the last words.
Thank you, Josue. Yes, I'm just holding so much gratitude for everyone that was able to join us today, for Josue, for holding this space for us, for Chucho and Jordan, just for giving so much of themselves. And one of the things, I always come into these spaces looking for at least one tangible nugget that I can take with me. And so Jordan, I thank you for giving us all that charge to be more than allies, but to really be co-conspirators, right? To really work with our feet and work with our hands and not just support youth or put all of that pressure on youth to be the future, but for us to be a part of that as well. As Josue has said countless times throughout this hour, what we just did here was co-creating a space. And so I hope that we all take that challenge that Jordan gave us to co-create a world with our youth, to be co-conspirators with them as we work together to create the future that we want to see. So I thank you all so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you with us next month. So you're welcome to unmute yourselves. We get a little messy here at the end and always say hey and put our voices in the space. So thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Awesome.
Thank
you, everybody.
Really got a lot
Love
of
everybody. Nothing but love.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Hold each other up. Hold each other up.
Thanks, everyone.